Before we talk about mixing, let's talk about some things you can do to help yourself get to the best mix possible as fast as possible. The first thing to do to achieve a perfect mix is to have your monitors set up correctly. That means that they're up off of the desk. They're not directly on a desk. When monitors are sitting on a desk, sound bounces off of the desk into our ears really quickly. So, raising your speakers up off of the desk will eliminate that reflection of sound, which ruins your image of the audio. Good monitor placement would be up on stands or something that gets it off the desk and at your ear level. In your room, you should have your speakers away from the wall. Sound even comes from the back of the speakers, which will reflect off of the wall and end up distorting your listening perspective. The monitors should be 2 points of an equilateral triangle, you being the third point, and that means there is the same distance between the two speakers as there is between you and each of those speakers. This is the sweet spot. This is the prime listening position for mixing. Also, you'll want to have your room treated for sound, and this is something we'll go more in depth into in another supplemental lecture. Suffice to say, you'll have absorbers on your wall, diffusers on your walls, bass traps, and all of these are set up so that you end up creating a neutral sounding listening space. This is crucial. This is going to help you get great sounding mixes even faster. When you're working in a space that's not neutral sounding, you're going to create a mix that sounds good only in that space. So that means that when you take it out of that space, say into your car, a boombox, your stereo, a computer, your friend's place, it's not going to sound right. Making your listening space neutral sounding means that you'll be able to create a well-balanced mix that's easily translatable, that sounds good everywhere. So, having good monitor placement, sitting in the sweet spot, eliminating reflections, and having a neutral sounding space is all going to help you find a balance to your mix much faster and much easier. Next, in the DAW itself, let's check some of the settings. First, let's increase the hardware buffer size. When you're recording, you generally decrease the hardware buffer size. Hardware buffer size creates a latency in your system, meaning that there's a delay between when your musician or performer creates a signal and when you hear it back through the headphones or the monitors. And that delay can get pretty distracting, especially for the musician. We call that latency. So, reducing your hardware buffer size helps reduce that latency. When you want to mix, you're using all these plugins and you got all these tracks, you need a lot more power to your system, so that's when you want to increase your hardware buffer size. You want to have your delay compensation turned on and your delay compensation engine set at a high enough level that you are compensating for all delay. The delay is created by the plugins. The plugins are doing a lot of processing to your audio instantaneously, and they're creating just the slightest amount of delay between each other. And that slight amount of delay means that you could be having phase issues. With phase issues, we could be losing bass frequencies. We could lose a lot of the fullness of our mix, the depth to our mix. You might be amazed by how much of an improvement delay compensation will make on your mix because you're eliminating a lot of these phase issues. Enable your system to do automatic backups and have it set for every 5 or 10 minutes. Automatic backups have saved my sessions so many times. Maybe I made a mistake, maybe I erased something, did a mix move I can't undo anymore, or maybe the DAW crashed. Yeah, like who's heard of that happening? So, the automatic backups mean I have backups of my sessions from the recent past, so I don't have to lose out on too much time. On top of that, I save regularly. Command S or Control S when you're on a PC, it's a reflex to me. Save your work regularly. I have seen so many sessions lost because someone didn't press save. Use Save As to create alternate mixes or to test out new mix ideas. I use Save As for safety so that I can archive previous mixes in case I want to go back to something. I Save As to create vocal up mix, TV mix, a radio mix. It means that all of these session files are pulling from the same audio file folder, so I'm saving space on my computer. I've got all of my previous moves and decisions archived, so if I want to go back to anything, I can find it easily and don't have to fight my way backwards, trying to undo things and find what I did before. It's all there with Save As. Create a master bus track to monitor your overall levels. Now, you might have good headroom across all your tracks, and you might not be clipping anywhere, but cumulatively, you might be maxing out the output of your system. So, a master fader will help you keep an eye on how your overall output is looking. Just make sure you maintain a good amount of headroom in your mix. The next step to creating the perfect mix is ear training. Yes, we all practice ear training to learn how to mix better. The first thing you want to do is find your reference song and orient yourself with that. Find a song that you know, and you know it well, and you know how it sounds, and it's a good representation of the entire frequency spectrum. Make sure it represents lows well, mids well, highs well, that it's mixed well, you like how the instruments sound, you like its balance. So you're going to take that reference song and you're going to listen to it in your mixing space. And that doesn't mean that you're going to sit and enjoy your favorite song. You're going to analyze the song in that room. How does this room make this song sound? How did the lows sound in this room? Are they lost? Are they swallowed up? Are they emphasized? Are they ringing out in this room? How are the highs? Are they kind of bright? Is the room kind of dull? Does the room make this song sound boxy? And this is going to tell you what kind of mix issues you're going to come across. This is going to give you a reference to say how your mix should sound in this room. Maybe your mix is going to sound a little more boxy, so keep that in mind. Don't overcompensate for it. If you know that the bass is emphasized in the room, keep it in mind and don't overcompensate too much. The reference song helps you figure out what issues you might have with this mix and helps you get settled in your listening space. Listen at an ideal listening level, which happens to be around 80 decibels on the A-weighted scale. So for some of you, this might be kind of quiet, and for others, it can be kind of loud. For me, this is a loud level to listen at, but there's a reason for this, and it has to do with how we hear. Now, we're going to get a little sciencey in here for a second, so this has to do with the Fletcher-Munson curves. All this means is that there were two scientists named Fletcher and Munson, and they studied the way humans hear. And they realized that we don't hear linearly. We don't hear straight across the spectrum. We hear with curves, and we hear differently at different listening levels. This is the main point. We hear differently at different volume levels. The lower the volume of something, the less low frequency and high frequencies we hear. The louder the sound, the more lower frequencies and high frequencies we hear. And you might be saying, well, duh, I turn it down, I hear less. I turn it up, I hear more. But this is in comparison to the mid-frequencies. And the mid-frequencies, it turns out, maintain the same balance as we turn up or turn down. So we hear the same balance of mid-frequencies at low, medium, and loud levels. However, our low frequencies and high frequencies get lost the quieter the sound is, and they get overemphasized the louder it is. It turns out that 80 decibels is the perfect median listening level. It's the perfect compromise of balance between low frequencies, mid frequencies, and high frequencies. What this means is that at 80 decibels, you'll create a mix that sounds pretty well balanced between your lows, mids, and highs, and it will still sound pretty well balanced if you turn up and as you turn down. Now, in contrast, if you mix at quieter levels, let's say 68 decibels, you might not hear the bass frequencies and high frequencies as well, so you might overcompensate and boost them so that it sounds balanced and even at 68 dB. When you turn it down, you might still hear the lows and highs pretty well, but when you turn it up, you're going to be overpowered by those lows and high frequencies. Same goes for if you're mixing at, say, 95 dB. You might think you have a great balance between your lows, mids, and highs, But as you turn it down, you'll lose them so quickly in your mix, you'll wonder what happened. And you can't expect everyone to listen to your mix at 95 dB. It turns out that 80 decibels is a great middle-of-the-road listening level to mix at, which is good because you can safely listen to 80 decibels for up to 10 hours. Now, this is assuming that you like what you hear and that you're giving your ears a break whenever they need it. Beware of listening fatigue. This is a warning that you are tired and that you are going to damage your hearing if you push it. So give your ears a break whenever they need it. Now, OSHA recommends that if you're listening at 90 dB, that you can only handle up to 8 hours a day before you need hearing protection. 95 dB, you can only listen up to 6 hours a day before you need hearing protection, and so on and so forth. So 80 decibels is a lot easier on your ears and a lot safer for your ears. Gives you a great balance overall, and it's really the best option for listening. But again, give your ears a break whenever they need it. That is key to a perfect mix. So, ear training. We're orienting ourselves with a reference song. We're listening at an ideal listening level. Another thing we can do is practice identifying frequencies. You'll be amazed at how each of these frequencies gives us an insight into the characteristics of that octave band and what that octave band adds to our sound. You'll find that, say, 500 Hz has a pretty boxy sound to it, and you will probably start identifying it in your recordings. When you know what 8K sounds like, you're going to hear that harsh frequency in a track and know where to cut. You're going to know what 50 Hz sounds like, so if there's a ground loop somewhere, you're going to hear it, know where it's at, take care of it. Learning frequencies is going to make your life easier while you're recording and while you're mixing. It's going to help you make balancing choices and EQ choices. It's going to make it all so much easier. Another thing you can do, practice identifying distortions. Know what a pure tone sounds like, which is a sine wave. Know what a square wave sounds like versus a triangular wave or a sawtooth wave. Another thing you can do, practice identifying effects. What do different kinds of reverb sound like? What do the different delay times really sound like? How does that color your sound? What do the different harmonic and modulation effects really do to your sound? Listen to these effects independently. You'll be amazed at how you'll be able to start picking them out in popular music. And then you can really start learning from the masters, learning from your predecessors, from your heroes, because you're going to be able to listen to their mixes and their songs and hear what they did, and then apply it to your own tracks. This is the key to finding the perfect mix as quickly and easily as possible. It's knowing what the tools you're using sound like, how they affect your sound, and how you can use them to best effect. Then we get to the mixing itself, finally! The mixing part of the perfect mix. So the first thing that you're going to do is just listen. Listen to the song. How does it sound? Where is it going? What does it need? Just sit and listen. Next, start panning instruments out. Start placing them in different places in your stereo field. Bring some instruments up and some parts down. Start balancing. You'll be amazed by how many issues are taken care of just by repositioning some of your instruments. However, keep your bass frequencies centered in your mix, like your kick drum and your bass line. This is the anchor of the mix, so let's keep it anchored in the center. Start using compression just to tame down wild dynamics. We know that we can use compression as an effect, but first and foremost, let's use it as a tool. See where the mix needs to go, where you need to take it, or where it's taking you. It might not want overcompression, so start off by just compressing down the wild dynamics so that you can achieve that nice balance between all your instruments. Filter out your low frequencies that you don't need. From there, only EQ when necessary. When you start soloing out instruments and carving them up the way you think they should sound on their own, there's no telling how they're going to sound in the mix. So as you EQ, compare your EQ decisions to the rest of your mix. Take your time. Don't pressure yourself. Don't give yourself a massive deadline. Obviously, when you gotta let go of a mix, you gotta let go of a mix. And a lot of us do work on deadlines. But especially if you're first starting out, give yourself time to experiment. And don't be afraid to experiment. Try out different reverbs, different tricks, different effects, different arrangements. Just give yourself the time to play around, but also give yourself time to rest your ears. Sum to mono. You'll be surprised by how many issues you weren't aware were happening in your mix that summing to mono can bring to light. For example, you might have major phase issues between instruments in your right and left channels. You'll find that your lows just disappear, or your mix suddenly turns weak, or you lose an instrument. Maybe an instrument starts to stand out above everything else. Summing to mono can bring to light a lot of these issues that you may not have realized were there. Plus, you don't know what people are going to listen to your music through. They might be listening through a mono device, so you want to make sure that your mix translates well into mono as well as stereo. Leave plenty of headroom in your mix. Leave your mastering engineer somewhere to go, or if you're mastering yourself, leave yourself some room to work with. Practice proper gain staging and leave yourself some headroom. Listen to your mix in a variety of speakers. Different issues can come to light because of a different listening space or a different speaker system. Make sure that your mix translates everywhere, and if it doesn't, make a note. I always take notes on how my mix sounds in other listening environments. Is there a frequency range that is popping out at you? Maybe there's an instrument that's not as well balanced as it should be. Different listening environments help you become aware of these problems, or help you check that you've got a great mix. So, in conclusion, a neutral sounding listening space will help you get a good mix faster because you're creating a translatable mix that'll sound good anywhere. You've got well-placed monitors so that you're not having any sound bouncing off your desk and you're just creating an accurate stereo field in front of you. You've got your DAW settings set up so that there's no phase issues, no delay issues, plenty of power going to your DAW. You're listening at proper listening levels so that you're creating a well-balanced mix that's going to sound good at low and loud volumes. You have a reference song that you are familiar with that you can use to orient yourself within a mixing space. And you'll take that song with you anywhere you go for mixing and for recording. You'll check your mix in mono so that you know that it will translate well to a mono system. And you'll check your mix against many different speakers, many different listening environments. And this will help you make sure that your mix sounds good everywhere, no matter where someone's listening to it. And finally, ear train. This is the best thing that we can do to get to the perfect mix. We train ourselves between mixing sessions so that we can identify frequencies, identify distortions, and we can identify effects. And therefore, we can spend our time mixing and experimenting rather than fighting with our mix. So, those are all the steps in getting the perfect mix.